I'm Rachel Bennett, 29, and on what should have been the happiest day of my life, my mother destroyed everything with just one sentence. As I stood in my wedding gown beside Trevor, my mom clinked her champagne glass for a toast. The reception hall fell silent. "We're passing the car his parents gave you to your sister Madeline instead," she announced with a saccharine smile. My new in-laws gasped. Trevor's hand tightened around mine. "That $75,000 Mercedes was our only transportation to our honeymoon, and the first indication that my mother's betrayal had been meticulously planned for months." If you've ever felt that knife twist of family betrayal right when you should be celebrating, you know exactly what I felt in that moment. Before I tell you how this nightmare unfolded and the revenge that ultimately brought justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and hit subscribe if family drama stories like mine resonate with you. Trust me, what happened next changed everything about how I understand family loyalty. To understand why my mother's announcement was so devastating, you need to know about the Bennett family dynamics. I grew up in a household where everything looked picture perfect from the outside. My mother, Catherine Bennett, maintained that image with an iron fist. She was the undisputed ruler of our family, micromanaging everything from our education to our finances. My father, James, was her loyal second in command, rarely contradicting her decisions. In our family hierarchy, my older sister Madeline, 32, sat at the top as the golden child. Whatever Madeline wanted, Madeline got. Academic struggles? Mom hired the best tutors. Career setbacks? Mom had connections. Financial troubles? The bank of mom and dad was always open for her. My younger brother Daniel, 25, occupied a comfortable middle ground as the baby of the family. He received his share of attention and support, though not nearly as much as Madeline. And then there was me, the middle child, the one who always had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Don't get me wrong, I loved my family deeply, but I always felt like I was striving to prove my worthwhile. Madeline effortlessly received validation just for existing. "Rachel, why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. When Madeline got B's, she was praised for trying her best. When I got A's, I was asked why they weren't A+S. When Madeline dropped out of college, it was because traditional education didn't nurture her creative spirit. When I graduated with honors, it was what was expected. My relationship with Madeline was complicated. We shared moments of genuine sisterly affection, but they always existed within this framework of competition that our mother had established. Madeline knew she was the favorite, and sometimes wielded that power with a casual cruelty that hurt more because I don't think she even realized she was doing it. Then I met Trevor Hamilton at a charity fundraiser 3 years ago. He was handsome, kind, and thoughtful, everything I'd been looking for. We connected immediately, talking until the event staff started stacking chairs around us. Trevor came from a wealthy family with old East Coast money, but you'd never know it from his demeanor. He worked as an architect at a respected firm, insisting on making his own way rather than joining his family's investment business. When I brought Trevor home to meet my family, my mother's reaction was immediate disapproval. "An architect?" she said later that night. "Rachel, you could do so much better. He's just coasting on his family name without any real ambition." The irony wasn't lost on me. Trevor was actually doing the opposite, working hard despite his family's wealth, but Catherine couldn't see past her own prejudices. What bothered her wasn't his career, but the fact that I had chosen him myself, without her guidance. For the first time in my life, I stood my ground against my mother. Trevor was worth it. We continued dating despite her thinly veiled disapproval, and after a year, he proposed. The look on his face when I said yes is still one of my most precious memories. Then something strange happened. Catherine's attitude toward Trevor completely reversed after she met his parents, Richard and Patricia Hamilton. Once she realized the extent of the Hamilton family's wealth and social connections, suddenly Trevor wasn't unambitious, he was thoughtfully carving his own path. The speed of her transformation would have been comical if it hadn't been so transparent. As an engagement gift, Trevor's parents gave us a brand new Mercedes C-Class. It was incredibly generous, and initially, I was uncomfortable accepting such an expensive present, but Richard and Patricia insisted it was tradition in their family. "We want you to start your life together with reliability and safety," Patricia said, hugging me. "We've given each of our children and their spouses a similar gift." The car became our primary vehicle after Catherine suggested I sell my reliable but aging Honda Civic. "You don't want to be seen driving that old thing now that you're marrying into the Hamilton family," she insisted. "It reflects poorly on all of us." Against my better judgment, I followed her advice. The proceeds from selling my car went into our wedding fund, leaving the Mercedes as our only transportation. Speaking of the wedding, what began as a relatively simple affair quickly ballooned into an extravaganza under Catherine's guidance. She insisted on paying for most of it, which I reluctantly accepted, not realizing that her financial contribution would become a weapon. "I'm your mother," she said, whenever I expressed concerns about the growing guest list or elaborate details. "This is what mothers do for their daughters. No need to thank me." Trevor's parents graciously offered to pay for our honeymoon, a 2-week trip to Italy that we'd been dreaming about. They handled all the arrangements, from flights to accommodations, while Catherine focused on the wedding itself. Throughout the planning process, I noticed small comments that should have been red flags. Catherine would casually mention family traditions, about sharing wealth, and how everything should be equal between siblings. At the time, I dismissed these remarks as her usual vague philosophizing. I couldn't have known she was laying groundwork for what would happen at the reception. The morning of my wedding dawned with picture-perfect weather. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the hotel suite where my bridesmaids and I were getting ready. My mother had booked the presidential suite, another example of her insistence on extravagance, and there was champagne flowing as makeup artists and hairstylists transformed us for the day. Catherine was unusually attentive that morning, hovering over every detail of my preparation. She adjusted my veil 6 times, scrutinized the makeup artist's work, and kept asking if I needed anything. This level of motherly concern would have been touching if it hadn't felt so out of character. "You look absolutely beautiful," she said, her eyes welling with tears that seemed genuine. "This is everything I've always wanted for you." Looking back, I realized she wasn't lying. The wedding was exactly what she wanted, a social showcase, an opportunity to align our family with the Hamiltons, and apparently, a chance to redistribute assets as she saw fit. Madeline arrived late, as usual, but with an energy I hadn't seen in her for years. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I can't believe the day is finally here. Everything's going to change after today." I assumed she meant my life would change as a married woman. I had no idea she was referring to her impending acquisition of our car. "Are you nervous?" she asked, as she helped adjust my dress. "A little," I admitted. "Mostly excited, though." "You should be," she replied with an odd smile. "Today you're finally getting what you deserve." Again, the comment seemed strange, but I chalked it up to wedding day emotions and focused on getting ready. Around noon, I overheard Catherine on the phone in the adjoining room of the suite. Her voice was hushed, but intense. "No, after the reception. That's the plan. Yes, the car. They won't need it right away anyway. It's already been decided." When I walked in, she quickly ended the call. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Of course, sweetheart. Just confirming some details with the venue." Her smile was too bright, too forced. "Nothing for you to worry about on your special day." I should have pressed her, should have demanded to know what she was planning, but the makeup artist called me back to touch up my lipstick, and the moment passed. Trevor's parents arrived at the hotel to bring additional wedding gifts, family heirlooms they wanted to present before the ceremony. Catherine fawned over Patricia Hamilton, complimenting her designer dress and asking about their recent vacation to the Maldives. The excessive flattery made me cringe, but Patricia graciously accepted the attention with the poise of someone accustomed to people currying favor. As the morning progressed, I noticed more odd behavior. My father seemed unusually nervous, checking his watch repeatedly and avoiding eye contact with me. When I asked if he was okay, he patted my hand and said, "Just emotional about giving my little girl away," but his smile didn't reach his eyes. The most bizarre moment came when Catherine insisted that the keys to our Mercedes be displayed prominently on the gift table at the reception. "It's a visual reminder of the Hamilton family's generosity," she explained. "People should see what a wonderful family you're marrying into." I argued that car keys weren't typical wedding decorations, but Catherine was adamant. "Trust me, Rachel. I know what I'm doing." Those words would prove more ominous than I could have imagined. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Walking down the aisle toward Trevor, seeing his face light up as our eyes met for those precious moments, all the strange undercurrents of the day faded away. We exchanged vows, and when the minister pronounced us husband and wife, I truly believed we were starting a perfect life together. The reception began wonderfully. Trevor and I shared our first dance to At Last by Etta James, and I remember thinking how fitting those lyrics were. At last, my love had come along. At last, I had found happiness that felt solid and real. If only it had lasted. Throughout the dinner, I noticed Catherine constantly whispering with Madeline, both of them glancing at the gift table where those car keys sat like a ticking time bomb. Trevor noticed my distraction and squeezed my hand under the table. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. I forced a smile. "Just wedding day jitters. Everything's perfect." I didn't want to ruin our day with vague suspicions about my mother's behavior. I had no proof that anything was wrong, just an unsettled feeling that I tried to ignore as we cut the cake and mingled with our guests. But that feeling grew stronger with each passing hour, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon of our perfect day. The moment that changed everything came during what should have been routine wedding toasts. My father had given a heartfelt, if somewhat nervous, speech. Trevor's father had charmed everyone with stories about Trevor's childhood. Several friends had offered their well wishes. Then Catherine stood up, champagne glass in hand. She looked stunning in her mother of the bride dress, beaming with what I mistakenly thought was maternal pride. The reception hall fell quiet as she tapped her glass with a spoon. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate Rachel and Trevor's special day," she began, her voice carrying through the room. "As parents, we dream of seeing our children find happiness, and today, one of those dreams has come true." She paused, looking around the room with a self-satisfied smile. My stomach tightened with inexplicable dread. "In the spirit of family sharing and supporting one another, James and I have made an important decision." She turned toward Madeline, who was already half rising from her seat. "We're passing the car his parents gave you to your sister Madeline instead. She needs reliable transportation for her children, and as newlyweds starting your life together, we know you'll understand the importance of family sacrifice." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I'd been plunged into ice water, my body going numb as the implications sank in. Trevor's hand found mine under the table, squeezing so tightly it almost hurt. Across the room, I saw Richard and Patricia Hamilton exchange shocked glances. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth, while Richard's face darkened with anger. Our friends looked confused, uncertain whether this was some kind of joke, but Madeline's face told the truth. Her expression wasn't surprised, it was triumphant. She stood up fully, walking toward the gift table where she picked up the Mercedes keys with a flourish. "Thank you, Mom and Dad," she said, jingling the keys. "This means so much to me and the kids." The buzzing in my ears was so loud I almost didn't hear Trevor's calm, measured response. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, standing beside me. "That car was a gift from my parents to both of us. It's not—" Catherine cut him off with a wave of her hand. "It's a family matter, Trevor. I'm sure your parents understand the importance of providing for all your children equally." Richard Hamilton stood up then, his napkin falling to the floor. "Actually, we don't understand at all. That vehicle was a gift to Rachel and Trevor, not to you, to redistribute as you see fit." Catherine's smile never faltered. "Well, in our family, we make decisions based on need. Madeline is a single mother with 2 children. Rachel and Trevor have each other and your family's support. I'm sure you can buy them another car if it's that important to you." The calculated insult in her words hung in the air. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. This wasn't just about a car. It was a public power play, a deliberate humiliation on what should have been the happiest day of my life. I finally found my voice. Mom, how could you do this? Today of all days? She looked at me with an expression of mock surprise. Rachel, don't be selfish. Your sister needs that car more than you do. We discussed this. We never discussed this. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Of course we did, dear. Remember when you signed those wedding documents last week? The car transfer was included in that paperwork. The memory hit me like a slap. Catherine had presented me with a stack of papers related to the wedding venue, vendor agreements, and marriage license. I'd been in a rush between final dress fittings and hadn't read everything before signing. A rookie mistake that would cost us dearly. Trevor pulled me gently away from the table. We need a minute, he said, guiding me toward a private anteroom off the main reception hall. Once the door closed behind us, I broke down. Trevor, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she would do this. He pulled me close, his face grave but calm. This isn't your fault. But we need to decide how we're handling this right now, before we go back out there. We're supposed to leave for the airport tomorrow morning, I said, reality crashing down. That car was our transportation to the honeymoon. My parents will help us figure something out, Trevor assured me. But right now, we need to decide whether we're staying at this reception or making an exit. I took a deep breath, wiping away tears that threatened to ruin my makeup. We're staying. I won't let her ruin this entire day. We'll deal with this tomorrow. Trevor nodded, pressing his forehead to mine. Together. That word meant everything in that moment. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. When we returned to the reception, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Guests were speaking in hushed tones, shooting curious glances our way. Catherine was acting as if nothing unusual had happened, chatting animatedly with distant relatives. Madeline was showing off the car keys to her friends, while my father looked miserable, nursing a double scotch at the bar. Trevor's parents made their way to us immediately. Rachel, Trevor, we are so sorry about this, Patricia began. Trevor shook his head. It's not your fault, Mom. We'll sort this out later. Richard wasn't so easily placated. This is completely unacceptable behavior. That car was a gift to both of you, and they have no right— Dad, Trevor interrupted gently. We appreciate your support, but let's not make a bigger scene right now. Rachel and I just want to get through the rest of our reception. The remaining hours of the reception passed in a blur. We went through the motions, cutting the cake, tossing the bouquet, our first dance, but the joy had been sucked out of the room. What should have been magical memories were now tainted by my mother's betrayal. As guests began to leave, I noticed Madeline pulling out of the parking lot in her new Mercedes, honking cheerfully as she drove away with my transportation to the airport. The sight of those taillights disappearing into the night felt symbolic of everything that had just happened. My sister driving away with something that was rightfully mine, with my mother's full blessing. After most of the guests had departed, Trevor suggested we address the situation immediately rather than letting it fester overnight. He was right, as usual. We needed answers before we could move forward with our honeymoon plans or decide if those plans were even still possible. We gathered both families in a private room at the venue. Trevor's parents, Richard and Patricia, my parents, Catherine and James, my sister Madeline, and my brother Daniel, who looked deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. I think we need to clear the air, Trevor began, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. What happened tonight was inappropriate and needs to be addressed. Catherine sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. I don't see what all the fuss is about. Families share resources based on need. It's what we've always done. That's not true, I countered, fighting to keep my voice even. You've always given Madeline preferential treatment. But this crosses a line. That car was a wedding gift to us from Trevor's parents. It wasn't yours to give away. Rachel, don't be dramatic, Catherine sighed. You've always been so sensitive about these things. Mrs. Bennet, Patricia Hamilton interjected, her usual gentle tone hardened with anger. That Mercedes was a gift from our family to Rachel and Trevor. We would appreciate an explanation for why you felt entitled to redirect our gift to someone else. Catherine's smile tightened. I understand you're upset, Patricia, but in our family, we make decisions based on the greater good. Madeline is a single mother with 2 children who need safe transportation. Rachel and Trevor have each other, steady jobs, and frankly, access to your family's considerable resources. If they need another car, I'm sure you'll provide it." The calculated insult hung in the air. Richard Hamilton leaned forward, his expression thunderous. "Let me be very clear," he said. "That vehicle was titled to both Rachel and Trevor. What you've done may constitute theft." Catherine waved dismissively. "Actually, Rachel signed ownership transfer papers last week. It's all perfectly legal." I gasped, memory flooding back. "Those papers you had me sign for the wedding details? You buried a car transfer in there?" "It wasn't hidden, Rachel. You should read what you signed." My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Catherine, this has gone too far. You told me Rachel had agreed to this arrangement. She did agree by signing the papers, James. Don't start getting cold feet now." The realization that my father had known about this plan hit me like a physical blow. "Dad, you knew about this?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Your mother said it was all settled, that you understood Madeline needed the car more. And you believe that? That I would give away our only car right before our honeymoon?" Madeline spoke up, her voice defensive. "It's not like you can't afford another car, Rachel. You married into money. I'm struggling on my own with 2 kids." "This isn't about money," Trevor said quietly. "This is about respect. That car was a gift to us. If you needed help with transportation, Madeline, you could have asked directly instead of orchestrating this public humiliation." Daniel, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "This isn't the first time this has happened, you know." All eyes turned to him. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Mom's always redirected stuff meant for Rachel," he said, avoiding Catherine's glare. "Remember that scholarship money from Grandma Bennett that was supposed to go to Rachel's college fund? It went to Madeline's wedding instead. And those family heirloom earrings from Great-Aunt Judith that were promised to Rachel? Madeline got those too." A pattern that had been invisible to me suddenly came into sharp focus. This wasn't a one-time overstep, it was the continuation of a lifelong pattern of favoritism and manipulation. "Is that true?" I asked my mother directly. Catherine's expression hardened. "Family resources go where they're needed most. Madeline has always had greater needs than you, because you've never made her stand on her own 2 feet. The words burst out of me with years of pent-up frustration. "You've always solved her problems for her, often at my expense, and now you've ruined my wedding day to continue the pattern." "I haven't ruined anything," Catherine snapped. "You're being selfish and ungrateful after everything we've done for this wedding." "Everything you've done? You mean the wedding you took over and turned into a social showcase for yourself? The wedding where you humiliated me in front of all our guests?" Trevor placed a calming hand on my arm, then addressed my mother directly. "Mrs. Bennett, I've tried to be respectful of you as Rachel's mother, but your behavior today crossed a line. That car was our transportation to the airport tomorrow for our honeymoon." "You can rent a car," Catherine replied dismissively. "Or have your parents buy you another one. I'm sure they can afford it." Patricia Hamilton stood up, her normally gentle demeanor replaced with steel. "This discussion is clearly going nowhere. Richard, I believe we should contact our attorney in the morning regarding the improper transfer of the vehicle we gifted." Catherine's smug expression faltered slightly. "The paperwork is already filed. There's nothing you can do." "Actually," Richard replied, "as the original purchasers of the vehicle with documentation proving it was a gift, we have several legal options. Paperwork obtained through deception doesn't hold up well in court." The threat of legal action hung in the air. Madeline looked uncertainly toward our mother. "Mom, you said everything was properly handled." "It is," Catherine insisted, though I could see doubt creeping into her expression. "And anyway, the car is already in your name. They'd have to sue to get it back." "If that's what's necessary," Richard replied calmly. The meeting ended in a stalemate. Catherine refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Madeline clutched the car keys tightly, unwilling to give up her prize. My father looked torn between loyalty to his wife and recognition of the injustice that had occurred. Trevor and I left without proper goodbyes, emotionally exhausted from the confrontation. In the hotel elevator, I finally broke down completely. How am I supposed to face everyone tomorrow? How do we even get to the airport? I sobbed against Trevor's chest, my wedding dress crushed between us. "We'll figure it out," he promised, holding me close. "My parents already offered us their car to use until we sort this out." As he held me, I realized something important. In trying to hurt me, my mother had inadvertently shown me who my real family was. The Hamiltons had known us for only 3 years, yet they stood up for us without hesitation. My own parents, who should have protected me, had betrayed me instead. Sometimes family isn't defined by blood, but by who stands beside you when everyone else walks away. I think about your own family experiences while reading this. Have you ever had that moment when you realized who your true supporters were? When you're ready to hear what happened next in our confrontation with my family, let me know in the comments. This journey was just beginning, and the real battle for justice was about to start. The morning after our wedding, Trevor and I left for our honeymoon in a 10-year-old Volvo that belonged to his parents. Patricia and Richard had insisted we take it, dropping it off at our hotel at 5 a.m. so we wouldn't miss our flight to Italy. "We'll sort everything out while you're gone," Richard promised as he handed Trevor the keys. "Don't let this ruin your honeymoon." It was good advice, but difficult to follow. As our plane took off, I couldn't help replaying the events of the reception in my mind. The public humiliation, the calculated betrayal, the realization that this was part of a lifelong pattern. It all swirled in my thoughts like a toxic cloud. Trevor noticed my distraction as we settled into our first-class seats. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "Just wondering how I didn't see this coming," I admitted. Looking back, there were so many signs. "Hindsight is always clearer," he said, taking my hand. "But let's try something. For the next 8 hours of this flight, let's not talk about the car or your mother or anything related to what happened. Let's just be newlyweds excited about our first trip to Italy. Can we do that?" I nodded, grateful for his suggestion. 8 hours of wedding drama detox. I can try. And surprisingly, we managed it. We watched movies, dozed against each other's shoulders, and talked about the places we planned to visit in Rome. For those hours, we were just Rachel and Trevor Hamilton, newlyweds, embarking on an adventure. The reprieve didn't last, of course. Reality crashed back when we landed in Rome, and I turned on my phone to find 17 missed calls from my mother, 12 from Madeline, and a series of increasingly frustrated text messages. From Catherine. "Rachel, you're being childish by ignoring me. Call me back immediately." From Madeline. "I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about this. It's just a car." I showed Trevor the messages, my brief honeymoon happiness evaporating. "You don't have to respond right now," he reminded me. "Or at all, if you don't want to. If I don't, they'll just keep calling and texting. They might even call the hotel. Then let me handle it." Trevor took my phone and typed a brief message to my mother. "Rachel and I are on our honeymoon. We will discuss the car situation when we return in 2 weeks. Please respect our privacy until then." He showed it to me before sending. "Is this okay?" I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Setting boundaries with my mother had always been nearly impossible for me. Watching Trevor do it so effortlessly was both impressive and educational. We tried our best to enjoy our honeymoon, and there were genuinely wonderful moments. The Colosseum at sunset, shared gelato in piazzas, wine tasting in Tuscany, these memories weren't completely overshadowed by the wedding disaster. But during quiet moments, the reality of what had happened would creep back in. One night, sitting on the balcony of our Florence hotel room, I finally allowed myself to truly process my feelings. "I'm not just angry about the car," I told Trevor. "I'm heartbroken that my own mother would deliberately humiliate me on my wedding day. What kind of person does that to their child?" Trevor considered the question carefully. "Someone who doesn't see boundaries between herself and her children. Someone who views you as an extension of herself rather than as your own person." His words resonated deeply. "She's always controlled everything. My education, my career choices, even who I dated before you. When I finally made a choice, she couldn't control. She found a way to reassert control," Trevor finished. "By taking something important from us and giving it to your sister." "And Madeline just went along with it," I added bitterly. "She had to know this would hurt me." "I think your sister has been conditioned to accept whatever your mother gives her without questioning where it came from or who it might hurt." The insight was painful but clarifying. For the first time, I could see the dynamic of my family with objective eyes. My mother had created a system where Madeline was rewarded for compliance while I was punished for independence. As the honeymoon progressed, our conversations about my family evolved from expressions of hurt and anger to strategic planning. Trevor, with his architect's mind, approached the problem methodically. "We need to decide what outcome we want," he said one evening. "Is this about getting the car back? Setting boundaries with your mother? Cutting ties completely? What does resolution look like to you?" I thought carefully before answering. "I want the car back because it was a gift from your parents, and because taking it was wrong. But more importantly, I want my mother to recognize what she did and apologize not just for the car, but for the pattern of favoritism and manipulation." Trevor nodded thoughtfully. "Those are reasonable goals. The car might be easier to achieve than the apology, though." He was right, of course. We spent the next few days researching our legal options regarding the car. Trevor's parents had already sent us documentation proving the vehicle was intended as a gift to both of us. Trevor's college roommate, now a lawyer, advised us via email about the questionable legality of burying a vehicle transfer in wedding paperwork. But the legal aspect was only part of our planning. We also discussed how to establish boundaries with my family moving forward. "I think we need financial independence above all else," Trevor suggested. "As long as your mother contributes to our life in any way, she'll feel entitled to make decisions for us." I agreed completely. No more financial help, no matter what. And we need our own place as soon as possible. We had been planning to stay in my apartment until we found a house. But now the thought of living in a space my mother had helped furnish felt suffocating. As the honeymoon continued, we received updates from both sides of the family. Trevor's parents had consulted their attorney and were prepared to challenge the vehicle transfer. My brother Daniel sent supportive messages, including screenshots of conversations where my mother was already rewriting history to cast herself as the victim. "Mom's telling everyone you abandoned the family after getting what you wanted from the wedding," he wrote. "She's saying you're ungrateful and that Madeline deserves the car because she's struggling as a single mother." This manipulation tactic was familiar, but seeing it so clearly described by Daniel helped me recognize how effective it had been in the past. My mother would do something hurtful, then immediately position herself as the victim when I reacted. I had spent years apologizing for my overreactions without realizing I was being manipulated. Not this time. By the end of our honeymoon, Trevor and I had developed a 3-phase plan. Phase 1. Secure our independence. Find a new place to live. Ensure our finances were completely separate from my family's, and establish clear boundaries. Phase 2. Address the car situation, using legal means if necessary, not out of materialism, but because it represented a larger pattern of boundary violations. Phase 3. Confront the family dynamics directly, with professional help if needed, to either establish healthier relationships or accept the need for distance. As our plane landed back in the United States, I felt a strange combination of dread and determination. The honeymoon bubble had burst, but in its place was a clarity I had never experienced before. For the first time, I was seeing my family dynamics without the fog of manipulation and gaslighting that had clouded my vision for 29 years. Whatever happened next, I would face it with open eyes and with Trevor by my side. Our return from Italy marked the beginning of what I now think of as our investigation phase. What started as an effort to reclaim our car quickly evolved into an excavation of decades of family manipulation. The first surprise came when I checked my bank statements. I had given my mother access to my accounts years ago when I was in college, and had never revoked it, a decision I now deeply regretted. The statements showed several large transfers from my savings to my parents' joint account in the months leading up to the wedding. "Did you authorize these?" Trevor asked, pointing to 3 transfers totaling nearly $15,000. "Absolutely not," I replied, feeling sick. "She must have taken it for wedding expenses, but I never agreed to this." We immediately went to the bank to remove my mother's access and set up new accounts that only Trevor and I could access. The bank manager seemed concerned when I explained the situation. "This happens more often than you might think," she said sympathetically. "Family financial abuse is surprisingly common." Family financial abuse. The phrase stuck with me, putting a name to something I had experienced but never identified. It was the first of many revelations that would come in the following weeks. My brother Daniel became an unexpected ally during this time. As the youngest, he had observed our family dynamics without being as directly enmeshed in them as Madeline and I were. "Mom's been doing this to you forever," he told me during a private lunch. "Remember your high school graduation money from Grandma? It mysteriously ended up paying for Madeline's summer program." "I thought Grandma changed her mind about giving it to me," I said, memories flooding back. "No, Mom intercepted the check and convinced Grandma you wanted it to go to Madeline instead." Daniel provided more examples. Birthday checks that never reached me, a small inheritance from an aunt that was invested on my behalf but never accounted for, college scholarship money that was redirected to family expenses. The pattern was clear and devastating. For years, my mother had been systematically diverting resources intended for me to my sister, all while making me feel selfish for expecting anything at all. Trevor was methodical in his approach to the investigation. He created a spreadsheet documenting every instance of financial redirection we could identify, building a comprehensive picture of the pattern. The total over the years was staggering. Close to $50,000 that should have been mine had been diverted to Madeline or back to my parent. While I focused on the financial aspects, Trevor discovered another troubling pattern. My mother had been spreading rumors about our financial irresponsibility to extended family members. "Your cousin Emily told me your mother warned everyone not to lend us money because we're bad with finances," he reported after a phone call with my extended family. "She's been telling people I'm taking advantage of you financially." The irony would have been laughable if it hadn't been so painful. The person stealing from me was accusing my husband of financial exploitation. Even more disturbing, Trevor uncovered attempts by my mother to interfere with his career. She had contacted several partners at his architecture firm, ostensibly to introduce herself as his new mother-in-law, but actually to suggest that Trevor might be leaving soon for his family's business. She was trying to sabotage my position, Trevor realized. If my firm thought I was leaving, they might have started looking for my replacement. Fortunately, Trevor's reputation was strong enough that these attempts failed. But the revelation of my mother's behind-the-scenes manipulation was chilling. A pivotal moment came when I met with my father privately at a coffee shop. Away from my mother's influence, he was more forthcoming than I expected. "Your mother has always been jealous of you," he admitted, staring into his coffee cup. "The way you forge your own path, your independence. She sees Madeline as an extension of herself. But you've always been your own person." "That doesn't explain taking money meant for me, or giving away our car," I pointed out. "I know." He looked genuinely remorseful. "I should have stopped it years ago. But your mother is very convincing, and it was easier to go along than to fight. Did you know she hid the car transfer in the wedding paperwork?" He nodded slowly. "She told me afterwards. I knew it was wrong, but by then it was already done." "Why, Dad? Why has she always favored Madeline?" His answer was illuminating. "Your mother sees herself in Madeline, the struggles, the need for support, the dependence on others. You're too much like me, Rachel. Self-sufficient, determined. Catherine needs to be needed, and Madeline needs her. You never did, not in the same way." It wasn't a justification, but it helped me understand the dynamic that had shaped my childhood. My independence, something I had always viewed as a strength, was precisely what had made me a target for my mother's manipulation. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Trevor's parents hired a financial investigator to look into the car transfer. The investigator discovered that my mother had not only hidden the transfer in the wedding paperwork, but had forged my signature on a second document. "This is fraud," the investigator explained during a conference call. "The initial transfer might be legally ambiguous since you signed it, albeit without informed consent. But this second document with the forged signature is clear-cut fraud." Armed with this information, Trevor's parents were confident they could reclaim the car legally. But I was more interested in a different discovery. The investigator had found evidence of an inheritance from my grandmother that had been kept from me entirely. Your maternal grandmother left specific bequests to each grandchild, the investigator explained. Yours was supposed to be $25,000 for education or a home purchase. There's no record of you receiving it. I confronted Madeline about this during a tense meeting at her house where the Mercedes sat prominently in the driveway. Did you know Grandma left me money that I never received? I asked directly. Her hesitation told me everything. Mom said you agreed to put it toward the family home renovation since you were away at college and wouldn't need a house for years. I never agreed to that. I didn't even know about the inheritance. Madeline's expression shifted from defensive to uncertain. There have been other things too, she admitted reluctantly. Birthday checks from relatives that Mom said you wanted to go into the family vacation fund. Graduation gifts you supposedly didn't want. And you believed that? That I wouldn't want my own inheritance or birthday money? I believed Mom, she said simply. She's always been so sure about everything, so convincing. It was the first crack in Madeline's armor, the first hint that she might be recognizing her role in this dysfunctional system. The most disturbing discovery came when I found out my mother had been monitoring my communications for years. Daniel helped me realize that the family email account my mother had insisted I use through college had never been deactivated. She had been reading my emails for years, gaining insight into my life, plans, and relationship with Trevor that she should never have had access to. This explained how she always seemed to know things I hadn't told her, how she could anticipate my decisions before I announced them. The invasion of privacy was profound and disturbing. As the weeks of investigation continued, the picture became increasingly clear. The car incident wasn't an isolated event, but the culmination of a lifelong pattern of control, favoritism, and manipulation. My mother had been systematically undermining my independence while positioning my sister as the perpetual beneficiary of her machinations. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Daniel found a box of letters in the attic of our family home, letters from my grandmother to me that had never been delivered. In them, she expressed her pride in my independence, her hope for my future, and her explicit wish that her bequest be used for my education or home purchase. She wanted you to have choices she never had, my grandmother had written. The freedom to build your own life on your own terms. The letters revealed a relationship I might have had with my grandmother, a relationship my mother had deliberately prevented because it would have fostered exactly the kind of independence she sought to suppress. By the end of our investigation, Trevor and I had compiled overwhelming evidence of years of manipulation and financial exploitation. We had discovered the depth of my mother's interference in my life and the systematic way she had diverted resources from me to Madeline. More importantly, we had identified the emotional patterns that had allowed this manipulation to continue unchecked for so long. My desire for maternal approval, my sister's dependence on preferential treatment, my father's conflict avoidance, all had contributed to a system that had benefited my mother while causing lasting damage to her children. Armed with this knowledge, we were finally ready for a confrontation that would change the family dynamic forever. 3 months after our wedding, Trevor and I arranged what we called the Reckoning, a formal family meeting at a neutral location. We chose a private room at a local restaurant, a public enough space to discourage extreme emotional outbursts, but private enough for the difficult conversations ahead. To ensure transparency and documentation, we brought along a family law attorney not to threaten legal action, but to serve as an official witness to whatever transpired. Trevor's parents attended as well, their presence a silent reminder of the support system we now had outside the Bennett family dynamics. My mother's face when she walked in and saw the attorney said everything. She had expected another emotional confrontation where she could employ her usual tactics of deflection, gaslighting, and victim positioning. The professional setting and third-party presence immediately put her on the defensive. "What is this, Rachel? Some kind of ambush?" she demanded, her voice sharp despite her attempt at a wounded expression. "This is a necessary conversation with appropriate documentation," I replied calmly. "Please sit down." My father looked resigned, Madeline uncomfortable, and Daniel determined. They took their seats without protest. I began with a prepared statement, my voice steady despite my racing heart. For the past 3 months, Trevor and I have been investigating a pattern of financial and emotional manipulation within our family. Today, we're going to present what we've found, and then discuss how we move forward from here. Using a tablet, Trevor displayed a series of documents on the room's small presentation screen, bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, documentation of the car gift and subsequent fraudulent transfer, evidence of intercepted checks and gifts, and a timeline of my grandmother's inheritance and its misappropriation. As you can see, I continued, this pattern goes back to my childhood and represents tens of thousands of dollars that were rightfully mine, but were diverted elsewhere without my knowledge or consent. My mother's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. Everything I did was for this family's benefit. Please let Rachel finish, the attorney interjected smoothly. You'll have an opportunity to respond. I continued methodically through the evidence, including the forged signature on the secondary car transfer document, the intercepted letters from my grandmother, and the unauthorized access to my email accounts. When I finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Do you have any response to these allegations, Mrs. Bennett? The attorney asked. Catherine straightened in her chair, her expression hardening. I've always done what was best for my family. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about resources. Rachel has always been more fortunate than Madeline, more naturally talented, more self-sufficient. As a mother, it's my job to balance the scales. By stealing from me? I asked incredulously. It wasn't stealing. It was redistribution within the family. Everything stayed in the family, except it wasn't yours to redistribute, Trevor pointed out. Gifts and inheritances intended specifically for Rachel are legally hers, not family resources for you to allocate as you see fit. My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Catherine, I can't defend this anymore. What you've done goes beyond parental discretion. You've been systematically diverting Rachel's resources to Madeline for years. I knew about some of it, but seeing it all laid out like this. He shook his head, unable to finish the sentence. Catherine turned on him immediately. You agreed with every decision I made, James. Don't pretend to be shocked now. I agreed because you only told me partial truths, he replied with unexpected firmness. You said Rachel wanted to help Madeline. You said she had agreed to share her inheritance. You said the car transfer was discussed and settled. I see now that none of that was true. Catherine's face contorted with anger. So you're taking her side now? After 35 years of marriage? This isn't about sides, my father replied. It's about right and wrong. Trevor's mother, Patricia, spoke up for the first time. As parents, we all want to help our children succeed. But what you've done, Catherine, wasn't helping. It was undermining one daughter while enabling the other. Neither approach serves them well in the long run. Catherine dismissed her with a wave. You Hamiltons with your perfect family and your perfect wealth. You have no idea what it's like to struggle, to have to make difficult choices. This wasn't about economic necessity, Richard Hamilton countered. Your household income puts you in the top 10% nationally. This was about control. The observation struck a nerve. Catherine stood abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be attacked like this. Rachel, when you're ready to apologize for this theatrical production, you know where to find me. She moved toward the door, but stopped when I spoke. I've prepared terms for moving forward, I said, my voice steady despite my churning emotions. First, full financial separation. Trevor and I want no financial support from you, now or in the future. Second, the Mercedes will be returned to us as it was a gift from the Hamiltons, not family property for you to redistribute. Third, restitution for the misappropriated inheritance from Grandma Bennett. And finally, family therapy if we're to have any relationship moving forward. Catherine laughed dismissively. Or what? You'll sue your own mother? Cut me off completely? Yes, I said simply. To both. The certainty in my voice seemed to finally penetrate her armor. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across her face. You wouldn't dare. I already have the paperwork prepared, the attorney confirmed. Miss Bennett has a strong case for fraud and financial exploitation. Catherine looked around the room, seemingly expecting someone to back her up. When no one did, her expression hardened again. Fine. If that's how you want it, consider yourself cut off from this family. Don't come crying to me when your perfect marriage to your perfect husband falls apart. She stormed out, leaving a heavy silence behind her. Madeline spoke next, her voice uncharacteristically small. I didn't know. About most of it, I mean. I knew Mom favored me, but I didn't know she was taking things that were specifically meant for you. Part of me wanted to lash out at her, to demand how she could have been so willfully blind. But the devastation on her face stopped me. She too had been manipulated, albeit in a different way. The car needs to be returned, I said instead. It was never Mom's to give you. She nodded slowly. I know. I'll bring it back tomorrow. My father looked years older as he rubbed his temples. Rachel, I failed you. I should have protected you from this. I'm so sorry. The simple apology, something I had never heard from either of my parents regarding their treatment of me, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. What happens now? Daniel asked, looking between us all. Now we rebuild, I answered, with healthier boundaries and clearer expectations. In the days that followed, the consequences of that confrontation rippled through the family. True to her word, Madeline returned the Mercedes, though she did so by having it delivered rather than facing me directly. My father called to tell me he was taking some time away from my mother to think about things, staying with his brother for a while. Catherine maintained her position that she had done nothing wrong, telling extended family members that I had turned on her after getting an expensive wedding. A few believed her, but most recognized the pattern of manipulation once it was pointed out to them. The most surprising development came from Madeline. After returning the car, she sent me a lengthy email, expressing genuine remorse for her role in the family dynamics. I've benefited from Mom's favoritism my whole life, she wrote. I think part of me always knew it was wrong, but it was easier to accept the advantages than to question where they came from. I'm starting therapy to understand why I was okay with this for so long. It wasn't an immediate reconciliation, but it was the first step toward a more honest relationship between us. As for Trevor and me, we moved forward with our lives, free from the manipulation that had shaped my family relationships for decades. We bought our own home, started building our careers, and established clear boundaries with my family. The car, ironically, became less important once it was returned. We decided to sell it and use the proceeds to start our own business, venture a clean break from the object that had symbolized so much dysfunction. Perhaps the most significant change was internal. For the first time in my life, I saw my family dynamics with clarity, instead of through the fog of manipulation I had been raised in. The patterns that had seemed normal to me, the favoritism, the gaslighting, the emotional blackmail, were now glaringly obvious and undeniably unhealthy. It wasn't an easy transition. There were days when I questioned whether the confrontation had been worth the family fracture it caused. But as Trevor reminded me, the fracture was always there. All we did was bring it into the light. He was right, as usual. The family I had now, smaller, more honest, still healing, was healthier than the intact but toxic system I had grown up in. Sometimes breaking something is the first step to rebuilding it properly. It's been exactly 1 year since our wedding day, a first anniversary that looks nothing like what I imagined when I walked down the aisle toward Trevor. Instead of celebrating with both of our families, we're having a quiet dinner at our new home, just the two of us, and the life we're building together. The past 12 months have brought more changes than I could have anticipated, most of them for the better. Trevor and I purchased a modest but beautiful craftsman house in a neighborhood we love. We chose it together, without input or interference from either of our families, a small act of independence that felt revolutionary after years of my mother's influence on my major life decisions. Our careers have flourished. Trevor received a promotion at his architecture firm, while I took a leap and started my own marketing consultancy. The business is small but growing, built on my terms and my vision. The relationship with my family has evolved in ways both painful and healing. My father followed through on his separation from my mother, moving into his own apartment and starting therapy to understand his role in enabling her behavior for decades. I should have protected you, he told me during one of our monthly dinners. Instead, I convinced myself that going along with your mother was the same as supporting the family. I was wrong. His simple acknowledgement of responsibility has been more healing than I expected. We're rebuilding our relationship slowly, father and daughter getting to know each other as adults, without my mother's manipulative presence between us. Daniel has become a more frequent presence in our lives, often dropping by our house for dinner or game nights. Freed from the toxic family dynamic, he's blossoming into the thoughtful, funny person he was always meant to be. He recently started college, pursuing the degree my mother had discouraged as impractical. Catherine herself remains largely unchanged. She refused therapy, rejected all suggestions that her behavior was problematic, and continues to paint herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter. Some extended family members believe her version of events, but most have recognized the pattern once it was pointed out to them. She made one attempt at reconciliation, if you can call it that. 3 months after our confrontation, she showed up at our new house unannounced, bearing gifts and acting as if nothing had happened. "I've decided to forgive you," she announced grandly from our doorstep. "Family is too important to hold grudges." When I pointed out that forgiveness would require acknowledgement of wrongdoing and genuine remorse, neither of which she had demonstrated, she reverted immediately to anger and accusations. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay maternal love? With conditions and demands?" It confirmed what Trevor and I had already concluded. My mother was incapable of the self-reflection necessary for true change. We maintained our boundaries, limiting contact to occasional text messages, and carefully managed family events. The most surprising development has been my evolving relationship with Madeline. After returning the car, she retreated from the family drama, focusing on her children, and eventually, her own healing journey. 6 months after the confrontation, she asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed with trepidation, unsure what to expect. "I've been seeing a therapist," she told me, fidgeting with her cup, trying to understand why I was okay with Mom's favoritism for so long. "And?" I prompted when she fell silent. "And I'm realizing how much it warped me, how entitled I became, how I measured my worth by what Mom gave me, instead of what I earned myself." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I should have questioned it. Should have stood up for you." It wasn't an immediate reconciliation, but it was the beginning of a more authentic relationship between us. We're starting to build a sisterhood based on mutual respect rather than the competition our mother fostered. Trevor's parents have become surrogate parents to me in many ways, offering the unconditional support I never experienced from my own mother. Patricia calls regularly just to check in, sending care packages for no reason other than thoughtfulness. Richard offers career advice when asked, but never presumes to direct my decisions. "Family isn't always blood," Patricia told me once. "Sometimes it's who shows up for you consistently with love and respect." The Mercedes that sparked the whole confrontation is long gone. We sold it and used the proceeds to fund both our home down payment and the initial costs of my consultancy business. What was intended as a tool of control ultimately funded our independence, an irony not lost on any of us. I've been in therapy myself, working through the effects of growing up with a mother who saw me as an extension of herself rather than as an individual. The process has been painful but necessary, helping me identify and change patterns I had internalized from my upbringing. "The goal isn't to vilify your mother," my therapist explained. "It's to understand how her behavior shaped you, so you can make conscious choices about who you want to be going forward." That perspective has been helpful as Trevor and I consider the biggest news of all. We're expecting our first child in 6 months. The pregnancy wasn't planned, but it's very much welcomed. Creating our own family has brought both joy and anxiety, the latter stemming from my fear of repeating toxic patterns. "What if I turn out like my mother?" I asked Trevor late one night, voicing my deepest fear. "You won't," he assured me, his hand resting protectively over my still flat stomach. "The very fact that you're worried about it shows you're already breaking the cycle." He's right, I think. Awareness is the first step toward change. I'm committed to creating a different kind of family for our child, one based on respect, honesty, and unconditional love. I've already written a letter to our unborn child, promising a legacy different from the one I received. You will be loved for who you are, not for how well you meet my expectations. Your worth will never be measured against a sibling's. Your boundaries will be respected, your voice will be heard, and your independence will be celebrated, not punished. This is my promise to you. The letter sits in a journal I started when we learned about the pregnancy, a tangible reminder of the mother I choose to be. As Trevor and I prepare to celebrate our first anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, I find myself reflecting on how differently things turned out from what I had envisioned. The public humiliation at our wedding reception, painful as it was, forced me to confront family dynamics that might otherwise have continued unchallenged for decades. Losing a car gained me something far more valuable: the clarity to see my family as they truly were, the courage to establish necessary boundaries, and the freedom to build a life based on genuine love rather than manipulation. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives are catalysts for the most necessary changes. My mother's wedding day betrayal ultimately freed me from a lifetime of manipulation. In trying to control me one last time, she inadvertently set me free. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. Family dynamics can be incredibly complex, and breaking generational patterns of toxicity is some of the hardest work we ever do. Has anyone else experienced that moment when a family betrayal actually led to positive change in your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more about my journey into motherhood and how I'm working to build a healthier family legacy. Like this video if you found value in my experience, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible, even after betrayal. Thank you for being part of my healing journey. Sometimes sharing our stories is the most powerful step toward reclaiming our power.